Hey guys, tonight we're going to ride into the heart of an empire that once stretched across the largest landmass in human history, guided not by soldiers or emperors, but by quiet men on horseback, saddlebags packed tight with strange, stubborn food. Imagine this. You're alone on a vast steppe. The horizon curves wide in every direction, and your only companion is the sound of your horse's hooves, the wind whispering through dry grasses, and the gentle jingle of your travel gear. You haven't seen another soul in days. But you're not lost. You're a Mongol messenger, and your mission is sacred. You carry a small pouch with a message that could change the fate of a city. And you carry another pouch with your only food, dried and packed to last for weeks, eaten in silence, on horseback, beneath open skies. You probably won't survive this job for long, between the wolves, the hunger, and the pace, but tonight we're going to drift gently into the life you would have lived. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It begins in the early 13th century, when Genghis Khan realized that conquering the world was only half the job. The other half, communicating across it. You can't run an empire the size of Asia with messengers who stop for lunch every 2 hours. You need speed, efficiency, and you need riders who think nothing of covering 125 miles per day through storms, deserts, snow, and mountains. So the Mongols built the Yam, a postal relay system so advanced that historians still call it the medieval FedEx. Every few miles, a small station was built where messengers could change horses, refill their packs, maybe sleep for a few hours, and ride on. Some riders carried imperial edicts, others silk, salt, spices, even intelligence reports. But most carried something even more precious: information. You, the rider, are trained not just to survive, but to move fast. That means no fires, no long meals, no bulky supplies. Your food must be simple, dense, and almost immortal. It has to survive jostling, sweating, freezing, and sometimes even a dunk in a river. And most importantly, it must be eaten from the saddle, while your horse gallops toward the next post. This is the quiet core of your life, motion and fuel. You don't write history, but you carry it. The world may never remember your name, but without you messages would stall, campaigns would collapse, trade routes would wither, your body aches, your lips are cracked, and your bones feel loose from the endless riding. But you press on, because someone somewhere is waiting for the scroll tied to your waist. And all you've got to make it through the next 90 miles. A small pouch of dried mutton, a flat cake of fermented milk curds, and a flask of something that smells like sour beer, but burns a little sweeter. You glance at the sun, measure the shadows on the earth, and lean forward in your saddle. The next station is 5 hours away. The wind picks up behind you, and the only sound you hear is the quiet growl of your stomach. The wind keeps pushing behind you as if it knows your path. The grassland stretches on like a green-gray sea, rippling beneath a sky that refuses to change. You're hours into this leg of the journey, and the world is a blur of hoofbeats and breath. You've started to count time not in minutes or hours, but in horses. How long until the next station? How long until the next mount beneath you trembles from exhaustion? This is the daily life of a Mongol messenger: dust, distance, and silence. Your journey began at dawn, with frost still clinging to the earth and your breath coming out in pale puffs. Now the sun is high and the ground has turned to heat and shimmer. By sunset, you might be threading through icy wind again, the steppe flipping its climate like a coin. That's the first thing that surprises people, how violently the weather turns. One moment, you're sweating through your deal, that long, belted robe of thick fabric that shields against everything but boredom. The next, a wall of freezing wind howls over the plains, stinging your eyes and snapping at the exposed skin on your fingers. Mongol riders knew better than to trust the weather. You wrap yourself in furs even under a baking sun, because tonight the world might freeze. The isolation gets to most riders first. No villages, no inns, no taverns with warm fires and songs, just you and your horse and the endless plains. Some days your only company is a hawk circling overhead, or the brief glint of another rider on a far ridge, gone before you can wave. The world feels hollow, like you're riding across the surface of a drum, waiting for it to break. But the steppe listens. You begin to understand its rhythm. You feel the wind shift a second before your horse does. You spot distant herds long before they appear. The land stops being background and becomes a companion of its own, vast and unforgiving, but not cruel. Food, on the other hand, that is cruel. There's no guarantee you'll eat anything hot today. No guarantee you'll eat at all. You reach into your pouch and chew slowly on dried meat boards. They call it tough strips of mutton, dried hard enough to snap in half like kindling. You chew and chew and chew. The salt burns your cracked lips, but it fills your stomach just enough to keep moving. Historians still argue whether Mongol messengers were the best-fed riders of the medieval world or the worst. On good days, a yam station might offer warm milk or fresh bread. On bad days, the only meal is wind and regret. At night, you don't build a fire. A fire risks attracting wolves, or worse, bandits. Instead, you wrap your deal tight, tuck your arms beneath you, and try to sleep beside your horse, who stays alert while you pretend not to be afraid. The stars above you look close enough to grab, but none of them will feed you. None of them will warm your hands. Still, you ride. Because the message must go on. Because the empire depends on you. Because in some quiet way, this endless ride feels holy. You're hungry now. The kind of hungry that chews at your thoughts and makes your saddle feel harder than it is. But stopping is not an option. You don't even slow down. Your horse's pace is steady, and your hands stay near the reins, even as your mind drifts toward the next bite of something. Anything. This is where the Mongol messengers' real genius comes in. Their food wasn't just durable, it was engineered for constant movement. You don't eat like a farmer. You eat like someone being chased by an empire's expectations. That means no forks, no bowls, and definitely no cooking fires. Your meals must be consumed with one hand, from inside a pocket or saddlebag, while the other hand holds the reins. Inside your pouch is a short list of staples, and every item is hard as a rock, but loaded with energy. The most important of these, borts. Now, borts might not sound luxurious, because it isn't. It's dried mutton, sliced thin and left in the sun until it becomes a kind of edible leather. It smells like something forgotten under a tent flap. But once you chew it long enough, and we're talking minutes, not seconds, it softens just enough to swallow. And it gives you what you need: protein, calories, and something to do with your jaw. It also never ever spoils. You could bury a bag of borts in the steppe for 6 months and dig it up without fear. Wolves might sniff it out, but mold won't dare. Sometimes you mix the borts into water to make a simple broth. But that only happens when you can stop for a few minutes near a yam station. Out here, you're just ripping strips with your teeth while the wind howls past. A dinner you'll never taste, but always remember. Alongside your meat, there's a hard white disc that could be mistaken for a stone. This is dried curd, fermented milk pressed and dried until it clacks like chalk. It's tart, almost sour, but it's light and loaded with calcium. And again, it'll last through every kind of weather, from summer swelter to mountain frost. There's also a kind of bread, not the fluffy kind, mind you. It's flat, dense, and baked with barely any yeast. It cracks more than it bends. But it absorbs water, broth, and airag like a sponge, so you keep a few pieces folded into your belt cloth, wrapped in oiled fabric. Sometimes you find surprises. Pine nuts traded from the forest clans, a little pouch of dried berries, or even candied rhubarb if you're lucky. But mostly you chew what your ancestors chewed, without complaint. And then there's the drink, a flask tucked under your arm, sloshing gently with something that smells faintly like bread, vinegar, and horse sweat. Airag, fermented mare's milk. It fizzes faintly on the tongue and warms your belly like a small fire. Historians still argue whether airag was truly nutritious or more of a cultural comfort. Some say it helped digest all the dried meat. Others claim it dulled the aches of endless travel. But you don't think about it too hard. You just take a swig when your throat is dry and let the sour fizz wash away the dust. Food isn't joy here, it's momentum. And you begin to understand why these strange, stubborn staples powered an empire. Every bite of borts, every crumb of curd, every drop of airag, they're all calculated. Minimal bulk, maximum endurance. You aren't just eating to live, you're eating to move. When the sun begins to dip, you check your pouch, still half full. That means you're doing fine. You haven't thought about hunger in an hour. Your legs hurt, your hands are numb, but your body is fueled. That's what matters. Because the message is still with you, tied tight under your coat. And the next Yam station, just a few more miles. You wake with a jolt, not from sleep, but from a kind of daydreaming trance. Your horse hasn't slowed, your eyes were open, but the road vanished for a few moments, swallowed by routine. You blink, adjust your grip on the reins, and shift your weight. The pouch at your waist clinks faintly, and you remember what's inside. Borts again. The dehydrated mutton isn't glamorous, but it's what you've got, and it does the job. Now, let's talk about how it got there. Back at home, or more accurately, back at the starting post, someone, maybe even your own mother, sliced fresh mutton into narrow ribbons. These strips were hung in a dry breeze, strung between wooden poles or tent ropes until every bit of moisture evaporated. No spices, no salt, just time and wind. The result, a meat so dry it could outlast your boots. This is borts, the lifeblood of Mongol travel. It takes effort to eat. You can't bite through it like jerky. You gnaw, working it with your molars until it softens like damp cloth. Some messengers carried a small knife just to shave it thinner. But you've gotten used to the rhythm: slice, chew, swallow, ride. There's something oddly comforting about the routine. You don't have to think, you just fuel the body. And it's versatile too. At Yam stations, those lonely huts scattered across the empire like dots on a chessboard, you might have a chance to boil water. Drop in a few chunks of borts and boom, instant broth. Add a few herbs or scraps of dried root and you've got yourself a hot meal. It's not delicious, but it's warm, and that counts. What's remarkable is how long borts lasts. You could cross deserts, plunge into icy rivers, and hang it under your saddle through a week of sunstroke, and it'd still be edible. In fact, historians still debate how much of the Mongol military machine was made possible by the sheer efficiency of this meat. Armies moved quickly, not just because of horses, but because of what fed the horses' riders. There's no campfire glamour here, no sizzling cuts, no spices, no smells to draw a crowd, just survival in the purest, most utilitarian form. It's said that a single rider could carry enough boards to sustain him for 10 days, packed into a space smaller than your forearm, and that meant fewer stops, fewer risks, more speed. You think about that as you tug a strip from your pouch, raise it to your mouth and bite down. It resists. It always does, but you've learned to pace yourself. Food for a Mongol courier is less about hunger and more about continuity. You don't eat because you crave taste. You eat to keep your muscles from collapsing, to stay in motion, to finish the route before the sun finishes its arc. You lean forward again, eyes narrowing as the hills shift ahead of you. The wind rises slightly, stirring your horse's mane. Somewhere in the distance, maybe half a day's ride, you know there's a post station. Maybe a warm broth if they're prepared. Maybe just water and a place to switch horses. But for now, it's just you, a pouch of boards. And the endless steppe. The taste is forgettable. The purpose is not. You've made it halfway to the next post. The sun hovers high, a pale disk blurred by dust. Your lips are cracked, your throat dry, but you reach for the flask tied snug to your saddle. You unstopper it with a practiced hand, careful not to spill a drop as the horse jolts over uneven ground, and take a cautious sip. It fizzes a little on your tongue, warm and sour. Then comes the bite. Airag. It's fermented mare's milk, tangy, a bit sharp, and if it's been sitting too long, it might curdle a bit in your mouth. But it wakes you up, and it's oddly satisfying. Not like wine, not like beer. It's different. You can feel it moving through your body almost immediately, like lighting a tiny fire in your chest. It doesn't get you drunk, not really. Just buzzed enough to keep your eyes sharp and your hands steady. Airag is your traveling companion. It's also a marvel of practicality. Fresh milk would spoil in a matter of hours out here. But fermented milk? That's another story. It resists decay. It foams slightly in the flask, stays cool in the wind, and leaves a tang that cuts through the dust in your throat. The Mongols don't just drink this stuff for fun. It's a cornerstone of steppe survival. Rich in protein, packed with calories, and easy to make. You milk the mare, pour it into a leather sack, often a well-used one that's seen hundreds of batches before, and let nature do the rest. Time, air, motion. You just hang the sack by your saddle or tent post and agitate it now and then. Some say the best airag is stirred by 1,000 footsteps. Of course, every rider has a preference. Some like it mild and smooth. Others crave that sharp, vinegary tang that makes your eyes water. You take whatever you're given. There's no room for pickiness when you're galloping across 90 miles of wilderness with a message strapped to your belt. Historians still argue about how much the Mongol reliance on mare's milk shaped their diet and mobility. Airag wasn't just a drink, it was a symbol of nomadic life, portable, renewable, fermented on the go. It nourished, hydrated, and gave just enough of a mental lift to keep you riding. You remember a tale told at one of the Yam stations about a courier who rode for 5 days straight on nothing but boards and airag. They say he delivered the message to the Khan's court and collapsed before he could say a word. Nobody knows if it's true, but it feels believable. You finish your sip, cork the flask, and wipe your mouth with the back of your hand. The wind's colder now. Maybe a storm is brewing to the west. You squint, judging the sky. The horse knows the rhythm by now. He gallops without urging, hooves pounding a steady drumbeat into the dirt. And you ride, belly half full of sour milk and leathery meat, carrying words from one world to another. The air smells like dust and milk. Your breath tastes like iron. And your pace, always your pace, remains steady. Your legs are sore, not the kind of soreness that fades overnight, but the deep ache that settles into your bones after weeks on horseback. Still, you press on. Because out here, comfort is a luxury you can't afford, and mealtime is more like a quiet ritual of survival than anything else. You reach into your saddlebag and pull out a small pouch. Inside, a handful of dried cheese curds, some hard blood sausage wrapped in gut casing, and a crumbling square of yogurt that's been sun-dried until it resembles chalk. Welcome to the steppe pantry. This isn't food designed for pleasure, it's fuel. Compact, lightweight, and built to survive extremes. No spice, no garnish. Just the bare essentials needed to keep a rider moving across 100 miles of open land without slowing down. The cheese curds are called arul. You pop one into your mouth and chew slowly. It's dry, almost painfully so, and sharp like a mix between parmesan and chalk dust. But it does the trick. The protein hits your system and your jaw works just enough to distract you from the monotony of the endless plain. The sausage? That's kushur or some variant of it. Blood mixed with fat and stuffed into a casing, then left to dry until it's tougher than your boots. You nibble off a chunk and let it sit on your tongue, softening slightly in your saliva before you try to chew. It's dense, salty, metallic. The yogurt tablet? That's kurut, made by straining fermented milk, drying it in balls or cakes, and letting the sun bake it into food that lasts for months. It crumbles between your fingers, slightly sour, but it gives you just enough calcium and bite to keep your stomach from turning inside out. You wonder what a European traveler would think of this lunch. Probably gag. But to you it's familiar, comforting even. Historians still debate how the Mongols balanced such minimal nutrition with their massive energy expenditure. Some argue the constant riding slowed their metabolism. Others point to the high protein and fat content of these preserved foods. But there's little question. This diet, humble as it is, powered an empire. And it didn't vary much from day to day. Mongol messengers weren't stopping at markets or inns. They weren't foraging in the woods. They relied on what the steppe gave them and what they could carry without risk of spoilage. You remember once, passing another rider going the opposite way. You nodded at each other, said nothing, and in that silent moment he tossed you a dried apricot. Where he got it, you never knew. But you remember the sweetness, the sudden burst of color and sugar in your mouth. It was like eating sunlight. That kind of moment, rare and precious. But most days it's just you and the steppe pantry. The quiet chew of hard curds, the dull metallic taste of dried blood, the ghost of sourness in sun-baked yogurt. It's not a feast, but it gets you to the next relay. You look to the horizon. The sky is beginning to turn, shades of rose and pale blue fading toward dusk. You reach into your pouch again and count what's left. 4 curds. Half a sausage. 1 last piece of kurut. Enough for the night. You stuff them back in the pouch, tie it shut, and tuck it against your belt. Your horse shifts its weight beneath you. Time to ride again. Because even out here, beneath 1,000 empty miles of sky, there's always someone waiting on the other end of your journey. And until you reach them, the pantry never closes. The sun dips below the curve of the earth, casting long shadows across the steppe. The wind is cooler now, and your horse's breathing has slowed into a rhythm that matches the sway of your tired body. You pull your cloak tighter, your fingers raw from rains and sun, and scan the horizon. A flicker of smoke in the distance, a sign of life. Not a threat, no encampment, no raiders, just a low Yam station. You know the look by now. A squat building of wood and stone, a few tethered horses, maybe a herder or two. Shelter, water, and if you're lucky, something warm to eat. You're a guest of the Khan now. The Yam was more than a postal route, it was a promise. If you bore the Khan's orders or wore the medallion of the imperial courier, the empire would care for you. Across Mongolia, China, Central Asia, and into Eastern Europe, Yam stations served not just as rest stops, but lifelines. You dismount slowly, every muscle protesting, and approach the doorway. No one draws a weapon, no one barks a challenge. Instead, an old woman nods you in. Her eyes sweep over your worn gear, your cracked lips, and she disappears into the shadows without a word. You sit on a felt mat near a fire, the warmth seeping into your bones. A bowl is placed before you, no ceremony, no flourish, just a simple offering. It might be boiled mutton, or perhaps suivan, a kind of noodle stir-fried with meat. Maybe there's some fresh arag in a wooden bowl, still bubbling. You eat slowly, respectfully, because this isn't just food, it's survival shared. Historians still argue how deeply the Mongol state institutionalized this hospitality. Some say it was a legal requirement to feed messengers, others believe it was cultural. A code of honor rooted in the harshness of the steppe, where denying a traveler food could mean their death. But what's certain is this: Mongol couriers lived off the generosity of strangers, and those strangers, whether peasants, nobility, or station masters, rarely turned them away. In fact, it was common for entire communities to pitch in when a rider arrived. A child might refill your water flask, a grandmother might hand you boiled dumplings, a young man might help brush down your horse. No payment exchanged, just a nod, and the knowledge that someday someone else might feed their son on another lonely road. You finish your meal and bow your head slightly in thanks. The woman smiles, just once, and gestures to a pallet near the wall. You'll only sleep for 2 or 3 hours, but it will be enough. Because by dawn, you'll be gone again. You dream of trees, oddly enough, not the wide, empty plains you're used to, but dense forests, dripping with fog, heavy with unfamiliar bird calls. In your dream, you're still riding, but your horse's hooves make no sound. You're still hungry. But someone is always just ahead, offering you food you can never quite reach. You wake before the sky lightens, repack your gear, slip out without a sound. There's a new horse waiting, already saddled. The old woman is nowhere to be seen. Only a bowl sits near the fire, with a few scraps of meat left for you. You eat them cold, then mount up and ride. Because in the Mongol Empire, every station is temporary, every rest is short, and every act of kindness, no matter how small, is what keeps the entire system running. The sun climbs higher, flattening shadows and turning the dry grasses brittle beneath your horse's hooves. The wind is hot now, but your cloak stays wrapped tight, not for warmth, but to keep the sweat from evaporating too fast. Every drop matters. You've passed 3 dry riverbeds since sunrise. This stretch of the Yam is a hard one. No stations for miles, no shepherd huts or fishing villages. Just the endless plain and the creeping thought that your next bite might be days away. This is the part no one talks about. The stolen feasts and sudden starvation. You know this rhythm too well by now. One day, you're a welcome guest in a well-stocked station, sipping fresh curdled milk and gnawing on warm goat ribs. The next, you're curled behind a boulder, your stomach tying itself into knots, eating dried leather that used to be food. The Mongol messengers didn't have a menu. Their diet was a patchwork of hope, training, and grit. When the Yam ran smooth, with loyal station masters and good weather, you might eat better than a soldier. But when snowstorms closed roads or bandits looted outposts, you learned just how long you could go on a pouch of meat dust and stale arag. Historians still argue whether the Yam collapsed during certain Mongol successions due to internal conflict, or if it simply starved itself when too many riders, horses, and supply lines outpaced what the empire could feed. And sometimes it wasn't just weather or rebellion that left messengers hungry. You've heard the whispers of corrupt officials who skimmed food for themselves, of raiders dressed as couriers stealing rations from real messengers, of travelers who faked injuries to guilt locals into giving up their best stores. Once, weeks ago, you arrived at a post where another rider had eaten everything in sight, then vanished. All they'd left was a horse carcass in the sun and a note scrawled with blood and fermented milk. And yet, you keep riding. Because there are moments, even now, when kindness surprises you. A stranger leaves dumplings on a rock with no one watching. A family offers bread and says nothing, just waves you onward. You once found a buried cache near a marker stone, dried meat packed with salt, wrapped in cloth marked with the Khan's seal. You took one piece and left the rest. That's how it worked. Give when you can, take only what you need, and pray the empire remembers you. But tonight there's no giving. No fire, no food, just the memory of that stolen feast 2 days ago and the sudden ache that follows. You chew slowly on your last piece of boards, a strip of dehydrated mutton so dry it feels like chalk. You sip a drop of sour milk that stings your tongue and threatens to turn your stomach. You tell yourself it's enough, because you have no choice. The next station is still a day away. Your horse is tired. You are tired, and your food is gone. But you're a Mongol rider, and the road still stretches ahead. The sun is down now, and with it, the wind sharpens. You don't light a fire, you never do. A flicker in the distance could invite thieves, or worse. Instead, you press your back against a cold rock, tuck your cloak tighter, and eat in the dark. But calling it eating might be generous. This is the world of fireless meals, an entire cuisine forged not in kitchens, but on horseback, under open skies, and in the quiet desperation of endless motion. You break open a pouch and pull out what looks like a piece of dusty leather. It's Bortz again, your faithful, chewy companion. No fire means no stew, no hot broth, no fragrant steam curling into the night air. Instead, you chew and chew until your jaw aches, letting your own spit do the work that heat never could. When fresh water is scarce, and it usually is, you don't drink much with your meal, just enough to keep things moving. Mongol messengers were famously efficient with water, often sipping fermented mare's milk or blood mixed with water instead of the clean kind. It sounds strange, maybe even harsh, but in the absence of boiling, fermented drinks could be safer than a random mountain stream. Historians still debate how often riders had access to proper cooking. Some say it was nearly never, others believe larger relay stations might have offered hot meals. But for the average solo rider, especially on the more remote stretches of the Yam, fire was a luxury you couldn't afford. Not just because of the time it took, or the scarcity of fuel, but because fire meant stopping. It meant smoke. It meant sitting still long enough for someone, bandits, wild animals, or rival empires, to catch up. So you learned to survive without it. You'd leave food pressed against your body during the day to warm slightly from your own heat. You'd let cheese soften in the saddlebag. Some messengers even carried stones heated earlier in the day, pressed into wrapped bundles of grain or dried milk cakes to create a kind of pocket oven. Your hands fumble in the dark for a small cloth pouch. Inside, hard cheese crumbles at your touch. Arul, made from curdled milk and dried in the sun until it's tough as bone. You crack off a piece with your teeth and let it sit on your tongue. It tastes like chalk, salt, and sour dreams, but it fills your belly just enough. There's an art to these fireless meals, not in how they're cooked, but in how they're endured. And though it might seem brutal, even miserable, there's something comforting in the ritual. You always eat the meat first, then the cheese, then sip from the flask, then sit still. It's the rhythm that keeps your body guessing and your mind steady. It gives your ride a heartbeat, a kind of order. No fire means no warmth, but it also means no delay. And when the stars wheel overhead like distant campfires you'll never reach, you lie back in the grass, bones sore and stomach half empty, and remind yourself, you're not here for flavor. You're here to finish the ride. As the night stretches on, the wind picks up once more, pushing the dry grass against your face like the whisper of ghosts from forgotten places. You've been riding for hours, maybe days, your body starting to feel like one with your horse. Every creak of the saddle feels like an echo through your bones, and you try not to think about how much farther you have to go. You're a Mongol messenger, and you know you're never truly alone, not out here, not on the Yam. Still, the emptiness of the steppe can be overwhelming. It's a landscape that demands silence, where the only sounds are the rhythm of hooves, the wind, and the occasional distant call of a wild animal. And in your mind, you hear the sounds of your tools of the traveling stomach, the small, simple instruments that make this lonely existence bearable. You reach into your saddlebag and pull out your small knife. It's sharp, well worn from years of use, and the weight of it feels comforting in your hands. There's a crackling noise as you slice through a chunk of borts, the tough, dehydrated meat that has become your closest companion. No fancy pots, no finely crafted cooking tools, just this little blade, a flask, and your steady hands. Everything you need to survive this journey fits into your pack with room to spare. Because in the world of the Mongol messenger, minimalism is survival. The same can be said for the rest of your travel gear. A small fire starter flint tucked into the folds of your cloak, a coarse piece of cloth to wipe your brow, and your water flask, which you refill at whatever stream or well you pass. But it's not like you can carry much. Water, for instance, is precious. Most riders use it sparingly, knowing that drinking too much might slow them down. As you ride, you're forced to eat more than you want. The physical demands of riding day and night can be brutal on your stomach. When you're on the move this much, it's not about flavor or satisfaction, it's about function. These foods have only one purpose: to keep you going. You glance down at your flasks. The sour, fermented mare's milk you carry, Irag, is your lifeblood in this vast, dry landscape. A quick swig, it's slightly fizzy, almost like a drinkable yogurt, and it warms your insides even when the night air is cold. The taste lingers, strong and pungent. There's a peculiar comfort in the routine of it all. You don't have to think about your next meal. You simply eat when you can, knowing that each bite is another step closer to the next station, the next letter, the next part of your mission. At this point, your stomach has learned to be patient. It's not about being full. It's about just enough to keep going. Sometimes the thought of food becomes less about the physical hunger and more about the act of survival. To keep the system moving, to keep the ride steady, to carry the message that's more important than any meal you could ever eat. And yet, as you take another bite of borts, chewy, salty, and as dry as the steppe itself, you wonder just how long you can go on like this. Maybe it's not the food that's hard, maybe it's the knowledge that sometimes you have no choice but to keep riding. That the food doesn't matter, not really. What matters is the journey. What matters is the ride. And soon enough, the next station will be in sight. Until then, you settle in, letting the wind whistle past you as your horse carries you forward, the only sound being the soft creak of the saddle and the distant rustle of the steppe. The wind hasn't let up. It whistles low through the grass, swaying the dry stalks like waves on a golden sea. Your horse's hooves drum a steady beat against the earth, and you, the silent rider, have gone nearly an entire day without seeing another human face. But there's something else now, something more subtle. A scent. Not a strong one, just a wisp of something faint and familiar, cutting through the dusty air like a memory. You shift slightly in the saddle and reach for the cloth pouch hanging near your waist. It's stained from years of use, and inside a few crumbles of hard cheese, a cracked piece of unleavened bread, and a piece of dried meat rubbed with fat and ash. It doesn't look like much. It doesn't smell fresh, but out here in the open nothingness of the steppe, this is comfort. This is the smell of the steppe. You take a bite and your senses wake up slowly. The dried mutton is chewy and oily, with a faint earthy musk that reminds you of campfires long past. The cheese, dry and chalky, clings to your teeth. It's sour, but in a way that's oddly satisfying, like your body knows it's what it needs. You glance up. The sky has begun to deepen into the velvet blue of twilight, and every inhale brings new textures to your nose. The musk of your horse's sweat, the dust kicked up from 1,000 hoofbeats, the leathery scent of your saddle and boots. All of it blends with the tang of fermented milk from your flask and the salt of dried blood sausage pressed into a pouch beside your belt. Historians still argue whether Mongol cuisine was shaped more by necessity or culture. But to you, out here, it's simply survival, and strangely, even comfort. Each food item carries a story in its scent. The arag, with its sharp tang and subtle bubbles, tells of herders and mares, of fermented rituals passed down from family to family. The borts, its smell thick with fat and smoke, tells of long winters, of drying racks and roaring fires, of meat meant to last through frost and famine. Even your knife, slick with old fat and curved from use, has its own scent, metal and memory. Sometimes, when the night is quiet enough and the wind is just right, you imagine you can smell the Yam station before you see it. Horse dung, boiling milk, sweat, steam rising from broth that just might, be warm enough to burn your tongue. But then the wind shifts again. It carries the scent away, and all that's left is your horse's breath and the ghost of a meal eaten long ago. You chew slowly. There's no need to rush. These flavors, subtle as they are your only company. They speak of a world that very few will ever truly know, a world where food is not abundance or variety, but memory and motion, where the smell of fermented milk can remind you of a grandmother you haven't seen in years, where the taste of dried curds might bring back the image of a firelit tent, laughter, and the slap of bare feet on felt mats. You pause for a moment. The next post station is still hours away, but for now you let your horse pick its path. You breathe in deeply, letting the mingling odors of the steppe wrap around you like an old wool cloak. It's strange, you think, how even in this empty place, the smells of food, however faint, however fleeting, make you feel not so alone. You adjust your saddle straps and stretch your legs slightly, careful not to disturb your horse's rhythm. The sky is deeper now, indigo bleeding into black. A few early stars blink overhead, and the horizon glows faintly where the sun recently vanished. But you're not slowing down. You can't. This entire system, this great sprawling empire, depends on your speed. And what fuels you? Not luxury, not choice, just protein and motion. It might sound laughable, but the Mongol Empire, the one that changed maps, overran empires, and terrified the West, ran in part on dehydrated meat and fermented milk. Your diet, like your uniform, is standardized. No frills, practical, and designed for long-distance endurance. Boards, dried mutton, arag, fermented mare's milk, curds, and flatbread, each item chosen for portability, longevity, and energy. There are no sugars to crash your body, no bulky grains to weigh you down, just lean, preserved protein and enough lactic acid to keep your gut moving. You take another sip of arag, it bites, but it wakes you up again. Historians still argue whether the Mongols understood the science of nutrition or just stumbled into the perfect endurance fuel by tradition and luck. But whatever the truth, it worked. Because you're still riding. You've traveled more than 60 miles today, changed horses twice, crossed a shallow river and rode hard across 2 small ridges. You haven't stopped for more than a few minutes at a time. Your heart pounds slow and steady, like a drum. There's no time for real meals, no campfires, no cutlery. You eat in motion, drink in gulps, and keep one eye on the path ahead. And the empire moves with you. At any given moment, a dozen other riders like you are crisscrossing the continent, each carrying sealed scrolls, small parcels, urgent commands. Without this system, generals would act on stale news, governors wouldn't receive orders, supply routes would fail, ambassadors would vanish into confusion. But with you, the Yam pulses like a heartbeat across Asia. A rider leaves Karakoram and just 9 days later, news arrives in Persia. Military reinforcements are requested in the north and they arrive in time. A warning about bandit activity spreads in hours, not weeks. A trade dispute is resolved before blood is shed. You've never written a single law or raised a single flag, but your legs have redrawn empires. And it all comes back to what fits in your pouch, what keeps your muscles moving, what lets your brain stay clear through cold, fatigue, and hours of jolting in the saddle. Protein. Maybe that's why there's so little ceremony around your meals. You don't eat for pleasure. You don't even eat for comfort. You eat to deliver history. Back in Karakoram, some scholar may one day compose long verses about the great conquests of the Khans, how they built cities and shattered armies. But they'll likely forget to mention the cracked chunk of dried meat that kept the courier from collapsing in the night. They'll skip over the bitter milk that kept him hydrated long enough to reach the next post. They'll never ask how the empire stayed in motion. But you'll remember. Because right now your stomach growls, your saddle sores sting, and your fingers are cramped from gripping the reins for 12 hours. But you're still moving. And you know, more than anyone, that without this food, none of it would work. The empire might have horses and swords, but what it really runs on is you. You lean forward in your saddle and take another bite of boards. It's dry, tough, but it doesn't matter. Because somewhere ahead, another rider waits to take your message and carry it the next stretch. And somewhere behind, another message is already rushing toward you. The network never sleeps. It only gallops. The sun rises again before you've had a proper rest. A low golden light spills across the steppe, painting long shadows from every clump of grass and rock. You blink away the sting of dust and exhaustion as your horse trots down a narrow trail, your next stop just ahead. A small relay station appears like a mirage on the horizon. A wooden fence, a few yurts, the black curls of smoke trailing upward. You slow your pace, the handoff is coming. But before you pass your message to the next rider, before you collapse on a thin wool blanket for an hour or two of rest, you think, just briefly, about what this all means. All this riding, all this eating of meat and curds and chalk-dry bread, what was it for? And the answer is simple: connection. From the seat of your saddle, you have threaded together cities, continents, and kingdoms. You have delivered news faster than any land-based system before your time. You are part of a nervous system, one that turns a sprawling, chaotic empire into something cohesive, something responsive. From your perspective, it's all just hours in the saddle and food that never rots. But in the bigger picture, it's the foundation of empire. Historians still debate how such a loosely governed realm remained stable for so long. The answer, at least in part, is this: communication. Fast, reliable, ruthless communication. And what powered that? A rider, a saddle, and a pouch of food that never gave out. You've eaten the same thing for days. Dried mutton again last night, a shard of curdled cheese with the morning sun. The taste is sour, salty, hard-edged, but it keeps you upright. No time for spices, no time for indulgence, just the essentials: fat, protein, and the occasional swig of fermented milk to keep your gut tough. These aren't delicacies, they're tools. Every bite keeps the horse moving. Every swallow gets you closer to the next post. You are, in the most literal sense, fueled by survival food. And your horse? It eats better than you do. Fresh oats, grasses, a water trough. The messengers are expected to suffer. The horses must thrive, because without them, even the best riders are stranded. There's something strange about realizing you are less important than your mount. But that's the nature of the Yam. It doesn't coddle messengers. It respects efficiency. You dismount slowly, hand off your message scroll, and refill your water skin. There's a pot of blood sausage boiling inside the yurt, and the smell makes your stomach turn. But it's food, and you're too tired to be picky. You sit in the shadow of the station, chewing slowly, mechanically, like someone on autopilot. A fellow rider across from you eats in silence too, eyes half closed. There's no chatter, no greetings, just bodies refueling. The empire might be grand, but its lifeblood looks like this: messy hair, cracked lips, and grease-streaked fingers curled around something unidentifiable but vaguely edible. And you, wrapped in wool and leather, with your saddle still warm from the ride, are one more link in that chain. You check your pack. More boards, more cheese, one hard loaf. You won't rest long. The Yam waits for no one. And you, the invisible courier, must return to the trail before the day grows too hot and the next storm rolls in. Because your next journey starts in 20 minutes. The relay post fades behind you once again. The world opens in all directions. And you ride. The path winds ahead like a ribbon laid across the earth, faint but persistent. Your horse's hooves fall in rhythm, steady as a heartbeat. Wind slices across the flat expanse, tugging at your sleeves. The sun's heat pulses down, but you're numb to it by now. Your mind drifts, just a little, as it always does on these long stretches. You think about the food in your saddlebag. You've rationed it well, though the sameness wears you down more than the hunger. Dried meat, sour curds, hardened flatbread that could probably crack a tooth. The staples of your world. Still, you chew without complaint. It's fuel, not flavor. The dried mutton, boards, comes first, strips of meat shaved so thin they resemble bark, sun-dried until they weigh almost nothing. You learned early on to drop a few pieces in your flask and let them soak in water, softening into a greasy soup you drink in gulps. You don't even flinch at the taste anymore, salty, a little gamey, sometimes with the faint tang of smoke or fur. Historians still argue whether Bortz was invented out of brilliance or desperation. You know the answer, both. Then there's airag, fermented mare's milk. You carry a little in a leather flask, tightly sealed. It bubbles slightly when you open it, and the smell is sharp, like a barn on a hot day. The first time you drank it, you gagged. Now, it's a comfort, not for the taste, but for what it means: energy, calories, life. On lucky days, you find something new at a relay station: arul, hardened cheese curds left out to dry in the wind, or blood sausage thick with fat. Sometimes even a fruit if you're close to the Silk Roads. But mostly it's the same fare. You've learned to eat on horseback, no fires, no stopping. You pull pieces from your pack one-handed, your reins loose in the other. You chew while bouncing in the saddle, wiping your fingers on your trousers. Meals are moments, quick, quiet, utilitarian. And yet in these scraps and swallows, the Mongol Empire moves. There's a strange elegance in it. You don't carry royal seals or silk bolts today. Just a single encoded message written in tight, curling script. It weighs less than a coin, but its contents might change the fate of a city. Your food weighs more, it always does. No one remembers the names of the messengers, but every conquest, treaty, or trade agreement first passed through a rider's hands. Hands like yours, cracked and calloused, usually clutching a bit of jerky. The empire depended not just on fast horses, but on durable humans. And durable humans need durable food. You chew another piece of boards and glance toward the horizon. A dust cloud is rising, another rider heading the other way maybe, or a merchant caravan moving slow. You won't stop to greet them. You've got 70 more miles to go before dusk. The food in your pack grows lighter. The message on your hip does not. This is how history travels, not in fanfare or banners, but in tired riders and the gnaw of hunger under an open sky. You shift in the saddle, the wind brushing past you like a whisper, and somewhere between the dry meat, sour milk, and endless riding, you realize you've become part of something far bigger than yourself. Not a hero, not a legend, just a vessel, a body in motion, a messenger fueled by protein and perseverance. And that is enough. The road begins to blur. It's not just the heat rising from the plains or the way the wind whispers nonsense. Your body is giving in, slowly but surely. The constant sway of the saddle has become second nature, your muscles firing from memory more than will. Your message is still there, tucked under layers of leather and cloth. You check it often, not because you doubt its presence, but because it gives your mind something to hold on to. That tiny scroll, bound in twine, is all that connects you to the larger world. The food's almost gone. A few crumbs of dried curd cling to the inside of a linen pouch. Your water skin is half empty, and the airag is sourer than usual. Fermentation has a mind of its own in this heat. You drink anyway. The bubbles fizz lightly against your tongue. Up ahead, a dark dot appears on the horizon. It's small, but your eyes know what to look for. A Yam station. Relief pulses through you, not because you'll rest long, but because the routine remains unbroken. You'll swap your horse, refill your rations, maybe get a stale bun or a strip of sausage if the local keeper is feeling generous. Sometimes at these way stations you see other messengers. You nod silently, acknowledging their shared weariness. There's rarely conversation. Words cost energy, and your breath is already rationed. You remember an older rider once saying, "The empire doesn't run on gold or horses, it runs on the backs of people no one remembers." At the time it sounded bitter, now it feels like truth. The food in your life, so meager, so repetitive, is no less a part of this great machine than the roads or the Khan's armies. Every bite of bortz, every sip of fermented milk, every rock-hard biscuit chewed while galloping. It all adds up to something larger. Historians still argue whether the Mongol communication system was the key to their success. Some claim it was the tactics, the speed, the ruthlessness. Others point to discipline, structure, the clever use of terrain. But you, riding through the haze of your exhaustion, know the answer is simpler. It was all of it, including you. Especially you. Your horse snorts and quickens its pace as the station grows clearer. A wooden post, a low shelter, a fluttering scrap of cloth marking the entrance. As you approach, the keeper steps out. He doesn't ask for your name. He just hands you a freshwater skin, pats your mount, and holds out a rein for the new horse. You swing your leg over, already settling into the new rhythm. No time to waste, no glory in delay. The scroll presses against your ribs, your stomach growls. You slide a last bit of dried meat between your teeth, chewing slowly. And as the sun begins to fall, painting the steppe in gold and shadow, you ride on. Not for applause, not for reward, but because this is your role in the story of the world, and someone somewhere is waiting for what you carry. Now take a deep breath. Let the saddle creak fade away. Let the wind soften, the horizon dissolve into darkness. You're no longer riding. The road has quieted beneath you. The dust has settled. Picture yourself at the final Yam station, where a warm fire flickers and the air smells faintly of smoke and old leather. You've delivered your message. You've eaten your last bite of bortz. And at long last, your body can rest. There's a cot waiting, covered in rough wool, beside a clay bowl of soup and a worn blanket. The silence is different now. Not the tense stillness of the steppe, but the kind of quiet that only comes after a task is done. The kind that says you made it. Your hands stop trembling, your breath deepens. You feel the weight of the journey lifting off your shoulders like a cloak. You were never meant to be remembered, but you were never forgotten by the road. Every hoofbeat, every bite, every weary mile, you gave the empire its voice. And now your work is over. The fire dims, the wind stills, and somewhere out there, beyond sleep, the story continues. For now, just rest. Let your mind drift, gently and safely, into that endless open sky. Good night. Sweet dreams.